Skeggi did not take part in the sports, as he was getting old, but he was quite strong to use his weapon. From Thordar's Saga, Chapter 3. The High Middle Ages were a time of toil and struggle. To live, you were born tough, and to survive, you must live tougher. We see this best in Iceland. In Iceland, we get a look at the culture through the Icelandic sagas and the sagas of the Icelanders, which provide a range of information from heroes, folklore, myth, politics, law, and sports. Sports in High Middle Age Iceland were a great representation of the strength and violence that existed within the culture of Iceland at the time. Wrestling, náttaleikar, drowning, and skofurleikar were some of the sports played at the time, of which were all won through violence. The most popular of these sports, appearing sometimes within other sports, is glima. Glima, a form of wrestling which originated from combinations of fighting styles across Europe, was the sport form of krigsspena, of which was designed for war. Glima, despite being designed for sport, was still incredibly violent and resulted in multiple recorded deaths. Chapter 1 of the Saga of Gunnar, the Fool of Keldunup, we see one such death. Quote, Gunnar lifted him up onto his chest, carried him over to the raised bench where Thorgrim was sitting, and set him down on the footboard so that his spine splintered. End quote. Gunnar's Saga, Chapter 1. Glima was violent, yet incredibly popular. So much so that there would be public tournaments held at official and judicial events across Iceland, and it's currently still being performed. Another incredibly popular sport at the time was náttaleikar, translating simply to ball game. Most accounts we have of náttaleikar are with physical conflict during the game. Played with bat, ball, and often on ice, the essence of the game is like that of hockey. Náttaleikar implemented glima, physical assault with bats and balls, and occasionally skirmishes or murders would occur during and or afterwards. Quote, Grim had caught the ball and was running with the other boys chasing him. Egil ran up to Grim and drove an axe into his head right through the brain. End quote. Egil's Saga, Chapter 40. This is an altercation that occurred between the young hero Egil Skallagrimsson and Grim after Grim had previously shoved down Egil during the game of náttaleikar. After this, a small skirmish and feud formed between the families of these two boys, of whom were only 7 and 10 or 11. An interesting sport that appears only once, yet, as Arlen Donald says on page 8 of Viking Sports and Fun, What They Did to Pass the Time, 2016, quote, None of the men found this competition or the suggestion of it unusual, indicated to me that such wrestling matches were popular in the period, or at least not uncommon. End quote. Is a game of wrestling or drowning that would take place. In the saga The People of Laxadal, a match is described between two strangers in the water, of which one ends up being a king. They play a game of who can drown each other the longest. The match seems to occur in 3 stages, the first of where, quote, Hjartan pushed him underwater and held him down for some time before letting him come up again, end quote. This followed by the same happening to Hjartan from the stranger, and finally, quote, both of them went underwater and were under much longer. Finally, both of them came up and swam to shore. End quote. Laxadal Saga, Chapter 40. Lastly, we reach the most violent, skofurleikar, or scraper games, which, despite its lack of information, only puts emphasis on how much more important the violence was in comparison to the rules of the game. There is one reference to this event, of which results in a total of 7 known deaths occurring in one game. The game is described as occurring between 2 factions, the shoremen and the men from Born, of which is noted to be an incredibly rough game of skofurleikar. Quote, before evening came, 6 of the shoremen lay dead, and no one from Born. End quote. After the sport had ended, however, a character named Ornund told his comrades to go on ahead while he tied his shoes. Ornund then, quote, sat down rather abruptly. In that instant, he died. End quote. Hold Saga, Chapter 23. The killing that occurs in Glima, the violent passion of Nattalager, the drowning of swimming competitions, and the unbridled violence of Skalfalager. To die, to be willing to kill for a game. We see within the brief descriptions of sports told the violence that permeated the culture of Iceland in the High Middle Ages. Sports have shown to influence culture, as culture influences sports. Let me know in the comments that when you look at your own culture, in what ways can you see the influence of one on the other? Thank you for watching. Goodbye. Before I end this video, stanza 1 of the Havamal, translated by Auden and Taylor. The man who stands at the strange threshold should be cautious before he cross it. Glance this way and that. Who knows beforehand what foes may sit awaiting him in the hall?